Well, the General Assembly is over, and bills that need action taken on them are on the governor's desk. And just this past week, the governor started signing the first wave of bills targeting healthcare, housing, and energy. In other words, she's moving on her campaign promise on affordability in Virginia. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Eric LaVille, and you're joining us for our General Assembly series where the governor is taking action and signing affordability bills into law. As always, I want to thank you for joining us, as you always do, as we broadcast from the campus of the Norfolk State University, home of the Spartan Nation, from none other than WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA. You know, this time of the year, you know that we've covered various legislative pieces and the General Assembly. Now we've moved into the actual action on bills. That's right. Legislators were in Richmond for 2 months, debating back and forth through committee and on the floor and during crossover for the House and Senate bills to determine which version of bills will come out of the General Assembly and make it to the governor's desk. And the governor is making a decision to either sign, veto, or make changes and sign them, or allow them to take no action and they become law. And on April 22nd, we'll have that show where we talk about the reconvene, where the General Assembly would then take action on any legislation coming from the governor's desk that they believe they need to take action on. But before that, the governor has until April 13th to sign, seek amendments, or veto any remaining legislation. So today, we're going to take a look at some of the bills that have been signed into law where the governor is keeping her promise of affordability in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Now, as I mentioned before, the governor has signed several bills that advances her agenda of affordability for healthcare, housing, energy affordability. And with that, she also made a statement when she signed these bills. She said that no Virginian, quote, should ever have to choose between seeking their doctor, paying their rent or mortgage, or keeping the lights on, according to the Virginia Mercury. She also stated that she's signing legislation to respond to the real pressing concerns she's heard from Virginia families across the Commonwealth about high costs, and particularly at the pharmacy counter, housing market, and on their utility bills. Now, I'm just going to talk about rising costs that we see since various actions by our president, even before then, but even now, since we are engaged in a high-stakes engagement overseas, more specifically the war in Iran, we've seen affordability become more unaffordable. I don't know about you, but I've looked at, filling my tank up, and every week that I fill it up, it gets a little bit more expensive. There are some of our brothers and friends and sisters and relatives and other Americans that are paying a lot more on the coast. I saw $7 a gallon somewhere. Well, let me tell you, it's going to continue to go up. And, right now, barrel oil is at $142. So, and that's the futures trading, which means we're going to pay that cost well into the beginning of the summer. But with that being the case, any type of affordability to help us out, help us at the kitchen table, is welcome. When fuel goes up, that means the cost of food goes up because they got to transport it and they give it straight to the consumer, which is us. When fuel goes up, that means it takes a lot more to go to work, for our kids to go to school from the buses, which means our tax dollars go up, which means money is coming out of our pockets in order to help. When fuel goes up, that means energy bills go up because a lot of our energy utilities are fueled by, again, oil and gas, natural gas. So right now, any level of affordability is a welcome for the people of the Commonwealth. And if it's not welcome for you, I can tell you this, it is definitely welcome in my house. But I want us first start, we're going to look at healthcare, housing, energy, and we'll look at some other bills as well. But I want to first start with healthcare. When we talk about a healthy society is a better society for all of us. That's because you can actually go to work. You can operate. You can go to school. You can actually do things to keep the economy rolling and to keep your community moving in the right direction. So affordability in the Commonwealth of Virginia is very important for healthcare. With that being the case, our governor understands that. And with the work of our General Assembly members, both Our legislators in both houses, House of Delegates, and also in the Senate, they've come to an agreement and sent these bills for her to sign. So when you take a look at these slate of bills according to the Virginia Mercury, it's addressing healthcare affordability access, and then, of course, boosting housing supply and strengthening tenant protection. But let's take a look at healthcare. So this bill, I want to note it because this is my friend and a friend to this university, Senator Aaron Rouse, Democrat out of Virginia Beach, with a House bill accompanied by Delegate Katrina Carlson, Democrat out of Charlottesville. But Senator Rouse's bill, Bill 669, passed unanimously out of the Senate, which was aimed to prevent pharmacy benefit managers from inflating prescription drug costs. First of all, if you get 51, 60 votes, 70 votes, I mean, you're doing great. I mean, that means the majority of individuals, a lot of us doing down party lines, but that means some people crossed over to help. But if you get 70% of votes, 75 out of a vote in the committee or the House, that is tremendous. That means it goes out, it's passed. But this bill that Senator Rouse authored received unanimous vote. That means every single person in the Senate voted for this bill. Tremendous. Great job, Senator Rouse. But when we talk about prescription drugs, when we look at this time of the season, I don't know about you, but I'm suffering from pollen. So I'm buying a lot of, medication over the counter. But some people need prescription drugs. But not just for the season that we're in, but also just to live and sustain your life. With that being the case, when we take a look at what's happening, prescription drugs are going up like everything else. But what is taking place, this bill, it helps us. Pharmacy benefit managers, they end up being the middlemen that negotiate drug prices between health plans and manufacturing pharmacies. So the critics of this bill argue that they operate with little transparency, making it hard to tell exactly how much of their negotiated savings are passed on to the consumer. So Delegate Carlson and Senator Rouse have been working to reform this particular bill in recent years. So when we take a look at it, again, this aims to prevent pharmacy benefit managers from inflating prescription drug costs. Hats off. Any savings on prescription drugs, we'll take it. Another bill that was unanimously supported was Senate Bill 405 by our alum, the great Senator Louise Lucas, Behold, and also by House bill by Delegate Mark Downing, Democrat out of Williamsburg. This legislation invests in Virginia's health workforce by administering nursing scholarships. Let me tell you something. When you talk about healthcare and the future, we have an aging population. And with this population, we need more qualified healthcare workers, more specifically nurses, who are the front line. When you look at the medical health side, they're the front line. They're the ones that respond to you initially come in. Our doctors perform their duties, but the nurses are the one that care for us around the clock. So offering more health nursing scholarships means that there are more qualified, highly trained nursing professionals out there in the world. Just like from our great nursing program here in Norfolk State, and others across the Commonwealth. That's impacting us on the ground floor. And then also, when you look at a couple of more bills from Senate bills and House bills, it aimed to eliminate additional fees on healthcare premiums, while Delegate Ward out of Hampton sought to prevent life and health insurance from being denied to people who have sought care for HIV or AIDS. When we take a look at additional healthcare premiums, right? This is a bill, by the way, by Senator Jennifer Carroll Foy, Democrat out of Prince Williams County, and then also Delegate Patrick Hope, which is Democrat out of Arlington. Well, let's talk about healthcare premiums for a moment, because, we got something that came down the pipe in a big, beautiful bill that's going to increase healthcare premiums. When we talk about healthcare premiums, they're going to go up. And I'm letting you, if you didn't hear it anywhere else, you're hearing it here first. Your healthcare premiums are going to go up. What your employer has to pay, what you have to pay, period. And that's because money was $1 trillion, to be exact, was taken out of the healthcare pool because of the White House measure, which was also voted on and passed by the Republican-controlled Congress, in order to defund Medicaid expansion. So that means, also known as Obamacare. Even though it was working, even though it gave more people health insurance, even though health providers had more money to help keep us healthy as a nation, they took away $1 trillion. So what does that mean? If you take away $1 trillion, that means you get $1 trillion less service, $1 trillion less dollars to service people that were able to be serviced. And that means you're going to start paying, that cost was pegged to that money in the system. So that means you're going to start paying a lot more moving forward. But what this bill does, it eliminates additional fees on those health care premiums. Thank you very much, Senator Carol Foy, and also Delegate Patrick Hope. And then when we talk about preventing life and health insurance from people denied with HIV or AIDS, a lot of times, individuals contract certain diseases that are not their fault. We talk about things that are passed on to children, or like Arthur Ashe, in the early days, he contracted the HIV/AIDS virus from a blood transfusion because we didn't test blood at that time. It wasn't his fault, but he would have been denied before this bill passed. So hats off to Delegate Ward and others for helping all of us be able to achieve some level of care to allow us to live at least a full life, healthy as possible. So once again, that's health in healthcare. Now, let's take a look at affordable housing. When we take a look at housing, right now, according to Virginia Mercury, there was a state-directed study which confirmed a shortage of roughly 200,000 affordable housing units. All right? And what this does, this makes housing highly unaffordable. Now, you may say 200,000 for the big state of the Commonwealth of Virginia. When you have over 8 million people here, right, in a house, let's just say you're going to have at least 2, 3 to 4 individuals living. If you have a single family home, 4. If you have a couple, 2, maybe 1 child, or even a pet, or 2, or maybe a single individual that's working. When you talk about housing that's available, that means you're going to have not just 200,000 homes, but you're going to have approximately 500,000 people who don't have affordable housing when you take those numbers into consideration. That's a lot. That means that at least 500,000 people here in the Commonwealth of Virginia can't live in a place where they need to live or want to live in order to live, work, and play. But what the governor did, she wanted to increase the housing supply, which was central to her campaign. So what did our legislators do? Senator Mike Jones, Democrat out of Richmond, a good Capper brother as well, a good friend, and also Delegate Josh Thomas, Democrat out of Prince William, they passed a bill. They authored a bill that was passed in the General Assembly to leverage the state bonding authority to support the development of new affordable housing. When you look at how housing works, bond measures have to be passed and leveraged in order to do so, right? So with that being the case, these individuals actually help that effort in order to move more builders and contractors to get affordable housing. Not only that, but we also look at Senator Mamie Locke, a great senator out of Hampton, Democrat, and also in the Senate leadership in the Senate. Also Delegate McClure, Democrat out of Alexandria, in a Senate bill. They established Virginia's eviction reduction program, which is a measure both women had planned to pursue through their work on the Virginia Housing Commission, where they learned the diversion program was not being used as widely attended. Now, when you take a look at these two senators who are helping to champion affordable housing, one thing about affordable housing is that sometimes, not just affordable housing, but you need time to get your affairs together. So eviction reduction program, that means helping individuals reduce being evicted, having state support to help them. Times get hard, and you may look at people as a landlord. I was a landlord at one time, and you want your money on time because you got to pay your note and things of that nature. So all that taken into consideration, when you look at trying to help individuals to meet their needs so they can help landlords meet their needs, it's a win-win across the board. And then also when we take a look at housing and housing bills, we want to take a look at what Senator Van Valkenburg, Democrat out of Henrico, and Delegate Michelle Maldonado, Democrat out of Prince William, what they did. Now, they authored bills that was passed in the General Assembly that received signature by the governor that was aiming, according to the Virginia Mercury, to boost housing supply by making it easier to construct manufactured homes, which can provide more affordable housing options but are not always granted the same approvals as other single-family homes. Now, with this, when we take a look at the type of housing, manufactured homes, some they were called trailers, but those very luxury, homes these days. Matter of fact, you walk in some and they are extremely, extremely nice, but they didn't receive the approval or protections of a lot of single-family homes. So this also helps individuals that want a different type of neighborhood, but still to have the accommodations of a home. So therefore, they helped to author that bill, which was signed by the governor. Now, it's also noted that all of the housing bills Governor Spanberger so far has signed or indicated she plans to sign, because these are only a few, cleared the legislature with bipartisan support. Now, keep in mind, I mentioned Democrats with these bills because Democrats were the ones that authored these bills, all right? The Democratic-controlled legislature are the ones that authored the bill. With them authoring this bill, what ended up happening is that now they were great bills because it just not helps Democratic counties or Democratic districts, both Senate and House, but what it does, it helps all Virginians. If you need affordable housing, you need affordable housing. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat, or it doesn't matter where you live in the Commonwealth. If affordable housing is not there, it's simply not there. So therefore, this diversity of bills help to address affordable housing in many type of different areas, whether it be housing developments of apartments, whether it be manufactured homes, or whether it be single-family homes that are built also mostly very compact urban areas, or in the city, as we say, or out in the suburban area. It helps all individuals receive an opportunity for affordable housing no matter where you are in the Commonwealth. And one thing about the Commonwealth that we're going to do is that we're going to check the state of the water. I'm your host, Eric LaVille, and you're joining us for our series as we take a look at the bills that are put before the governor for her to sign for them to become law. The governor has April 13th in order to sign bills, veto them, or amend them before the General Assembly takes action on their reconvening April 22nd. With that being the case, the governor has signed, as of last week, a number of bills that are in line with her affordability agenda, whether it be housing, whether it be affordable pricing and cost of living, or whether it be energy. The governor is putting her pen to the paper and the bills are signed. Most of these bills, as noted, they passed the legislature with bipartisan support because affordability is just not for Democrats. It's for everyone. So those were just a few of the bills that have been signed, leading again to the governor's platform of affordability. But there's also another set of bills that she's signed already, and that are bills signed for school safety, student support bills that are in the law right now. Just last week, the governor put her pen to the paper to expand assessment training, mental health resources, internet safety, and emergency preparedness in Virginia schools. Now, before we go into this, I want to say that, one thing about safety in schools, all of us, I have children, many of you listening have children, or you have nieces and nephews, or you have grandchildren, whatever the case may be. But one thing that we should never have to worry about are our children going to school and coming home safe. That's the reasonable expectation. But times have changed, and many things are needed in order for us to ensure that our children are safe. And also, when you talk about safety, mental health and internet safety are two areas that first of all, the internet, we never had to address it until the internet became a thing. It's the way we live our life. And now we're talking about AI, artificial intelligence, very soon, and social media. But the mental health aspect, a lot of that wasn't discussed when I was in school. A lot of it wasn't discussed until recently. But we're thankful that we now have measures that are in place to address our mental health. So, as I always say, as Virginia goes, so goes the rest of the country. And we've got great legislators across the board. Again, these are bipartisan bills that were supported. both Republican and Democrats, because when it comes to our children and safety, there are no R&Ds. There are only Virginians. And the governor signed those into law. Now, let's take a look at these measures and what the governor said about it. The package of bills that I'm speaking of now cleared the General Assembly, once again, with unanimous or bipartisan support this 2026 session, according to the Virginia Mercury. Now, this reflected a broad push by lawmakers to strengthen emergency preparedness in schools, improve mental health resources, modernize student safety education, and provide additional tools for educators working with at-risk youth. And the governor, she signed those measures. I want to say bipartisan support is one thing, but when a bill passes unanimously, now, you need 70% to get bills across, when you look at, 60% when you look at certain measures, which means that even if you go down, now if you go down what we call bipartisan lines, it could pass if it's just Democrats. But normally, when you look at legislation, you need 60%. But these have passed unanimously, many of them. Once again, it shows how this legislature is working and thinking about our children. But let me tell you what the governor said. According to the Virginia Mercury, they quoted her with 2 quotes. She said, "As the parent of 3 daughters in Virginia public schools and a former law enforcement officer, nothing is more important to me than the safety of Virginia's kids." She also said that every Virginia parent deserves peace of mind, knowing their kids are safe, supported, and set up for success, and that their school is prepared for any emergency. She also added that the legislation is intended to give teachers, school staff, the training, resources they need, while it also reinforces priorities shared by families across the Commonwealth. And she herself also thanked the support of Democrats and Republican lawmakers. Once again, this shows Virginia's at its very best. Now, let's break down a few of these bills that are in law right now. I want to take a look at the bills in which we discuss safety. Now, with this, when we look at target threats and school readiness, this was a bill that was sponsored by Delegate Laufer Democratic, out of Albemarle, which requires threat assessment in teams in K through 12 schools and public colleges and universities to receive additional training on emergency substantial risk orders, often referred to as red flag laws. Now, what are these? These are orders already permitted under Virginia law that allow for the temporary removal of firearms when someone is deemed a danger to themselves or to others. Now, this new requirement incorporates that training into existing annual instructions. What it does, it really aims to ensure school-based teams are better prepared to recognize warning signs, coordinate with the courts for intervention, and also it expands how educators are trained to support students facing mental health challenges. Once again, when we take a look at the threats of our children, unfortunately, guns is a part of that. We live in a gun culture. This is America, so no explanation needed there. And of course, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, the Second Amendment and gun ownership is near and dear to a lot of citizens' heart. Now, of course, the discussion of where it's for defense or intimidation or survival, subsistence like hunting, that's a totally different discussion. So we're not going to deal with that right now. But there are some people that don't need to have firearms. Across the board, especially when you talk about our children and you talk about people who are interacting with our children, they don't need them. So this provides that additional training to find out who's actually at risk to harm themselves, and more specifically as it relates to our children, to harm them. This will help to keep schools safer and school shootings down. Delegate Henson, Democrat out of Woodbridge, on the House Bill 38, she sponsored a bill that your governor signed that set a clearer standard for required mental health awareness training. Now, this directs school divisions to include evidence-based practices tailored specifically to students considered at higher risk. Now, this includes youth affected by suicide, students with disabilities, chronic illnesses, those experiencing housing instability or foster care placement, or students who identify as LGBTQ+. It also, once again, provides explicit training so that you can't justify discriminatory practices or biased practices when dealing with these situations and individuals. Once again, when we take a look at our schools, it's a makeup of all of our community. So because our schools are a subset of our greater community, it's very important that we have training for individuals, our teachers, our staff, so that they know how to deal with these individuals and make sure that our citizens are safe. Now, my good friend Alex Askew, delegate out of Virginia Beach, Democrat, he sponsored House Bill 171. And what this bill does, remember I talked earlier about online, but he sponsored a bill which the governor signed that incorporates expanded instruction on topics such as online privacy, responsible social media use, and the risks associated with digital platforms. Now, this also recognizes online exploitation and digital footprints and put those lessons in an existing curricula. Now, it also gives school divisions the option to equip staff with wearable panic alarm systems designed to alert emergency responders of a crisis. Once again, when we talk about digital footprint, we didn't have that discussion when I was in school. There was no digital footprint. I learned keyboarding, which is typing, and I'm not that old. But again, times are moving so fast that we have to ensure that our students and everyone is understanding of how this impacts not just your now, but your forever. Because once it's online, say it with me, everybody, forever. Also, my good friend, Delegate Shelley Simons, Democrat out of Newport News, who's a former educator herself, she championed a bill, House Bill 592, which is signed by the governor, that provides devices to send signals directly to 911 and trigger school-wide alerts when necessary. Now, this is very important because it goes beyond emergency preparedness for several of the newly signed laws that focus on expanding support for students considered at risk of academic failure as well. And then also Delegate McQuinn, also a good friend out of Richmond, sponsored a bill that broadens how school divisions use state funding targeted for those students, allowing money to cover physical and also mental health services. So once again, this isn't about just spending money, but it's about spending money. It's also about paying for it responsibly as well. And then also the chair of the Education Committee, Higher Education Committee, Sam Roussel, out of Roanoke, Democrat. He sponsored a bill that makes permanent a school-based initiative that was originally launched in Roanoke and Petersburg, which removes the program expiration date and designated as a statewide demonstration model, which the law signals an intent to expand efforts aimed at improving school climate and reducing youth violence. So how do we do that? They focus on workforce development, exposure to career technical education, and building social and emotional skills while combining academic support with broader community success. Let me tell you something. When you have a skill and you're making money, you're tired and you're learning and you're happier. So that means you're not getting in trouble. Once again, taking our youth and making sure that they are successful. And then finally, Delegate Marcia Price, Democrat out of Newport News, also sponsored a bill, which is signed by the governor, that tracks and report unpaid student meal debt. This actually helps what we call the hunger. Virginia, this is a recommendation from the Virginia Commission to End Hunger. So this actually addresses food insecurity. Let me tell you something. When you're hungry, you can't learn. These hot meals that students receive, our students, these are sometimes the only meals they receive on a daily basis. So it's up to us to ensure that our students are not only safe, but also fed and healthy. Because a safe student, healthy student makes our schools healthier and safer, and it also gives us a greater product in our community. One thing we do know is that these are only the first set of laws. Other laws are on the table ready to be signed, bills ready to be signed into law. But one thing that we do know is that as we continue to work together as a General Assembly and bills are signed that are passed unanimously by bipartisan support, helps everyone in the Commonwealth. So once again, I want to thank you for joining us for this edition of State of the Water. And we ask that you join us next time and enjoy your Easter this Sunday. Until next time, be good, be great. God bless, and we'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Carrie Washington, and you're listening to State of the Water with award-winning host Dr. Eric Claville.